Hey, hi Ayush.
Hey, hi Gautam, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. What about you?
All good, Gautam. I think just like it is going to be a busy Saturday for me. I think a lot of things basically have to be done on the product front, and there are like a lot of customer meetings lined up on Monday. So it's just going to be, I think,
Quite hectic.
no less than a Monday, like to me on a Saturday. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all on.
Welcome, Gautam and Ayush.
Yeah, I should be. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us for the very first episode of OpsLyft webinar series. We're super excited to host you this morning. If you have any questions for our speakers during the event, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We would be more than happy to address them, each one of you at the end of the event, right? So let me just start by saying that today, Ayush and Gautam, every organization is chasing the concept of customer obsession, right? Is it about satisfying your customer needs 9 out of 10 times, or is it about constantly adding value to the customer experience every single day? So we are very well aware that starting your customer obsession journey can be intense and overwhelming, right? But we just want to tell our audience that they are not definitely alone in this. Today's episode is all about diving deeper into the breakdown of customer obsession, what it is, its qualities, and much more on this very first episode, how customer obsession drives customer outcomes, with Ayush Kumar, our CEO and founder at OpsLyft, and a very prestigious guest speaker for today, Gautam Krishnan, Vice President of Product at GameStop. I would love to tell a little bit more about Gautam here. Gautam has years of experience in product leadership positions and has delivered 10x growth for products while building teams that can deliver tremendously. He has a keen interest in startups and has advised various startups around his experience in product management, product leadership, user experience, and product strategy. A very, very warm welcome, Gautam and Ayush. We're really excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie and Ayush, for
Thank
hosting.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just start with addressing this particular notion that in today's customer-centric world, I don't think there exists any company which doesn't claim to be customer obsessed, right? So
Yeah.
Gautam, I'd like to start with you here to get an understanding basically about what does customer obsession particularly mean for you, and how do you practice it at GameStop?
Right. So I think conceptually, right, as in every organization claims that they are customer obsessed.
Right.
When for most organization is just a checklist.
Yeah.
They don't feel the user's pain, right? Unless and until you feel the user's pain, you are not customer obsessed, right? And this is one of the biggest challenges of every organization, that how do we, as product managers, as founders, as business teams, as customer support agents, how do we make sure that we feel the pain of the user and we try to solve for that, right? So for me, that is customer obsession, right? As in, we need to feel the pain of the user. So currently I'm part of a gaming startup, and we have multiple different games. And primarily for us, customer obsession means that, why do I play a game, right? I want to play a game because I want to feel entertained, right? And if I have a game that I myself is not happy about, I don't expect my users to be happy about it.
Yeah.
So I think probably one of the things that we really do well is, eating your own dog food, which means that we constantly play our game. We try to find issues. We try to see that, what is it that we are not liking. But that is only one part of it, right? As in, we may have our own biases in terms of looking at our own product, because we have looked at it probably 1,000 times, and, we don't see some glaring gaps in the product, which is quite obvious to a fresh set of eyes. That is why listening to customers is also important, right? And when I mean by listening to customers, what I mean by that is, unfortunately, right, as in, I'm just saying that in the way that companies or organizations have been created, customer experience or customer support team or customer success teams are supposed to be the custodian or be the voice of customers, right? But because of the various metrics that we put as part of the performance evaluation criteria, their objective sometimes change from actually solving the problem to closing a ticket. That is actually the biggest problem. The problem is that, people, if you throw a metric to a person and tell him to optimize for it, he will obviously optimize for it, right? But then what end up happening is that, I have a tat of let's say 1 hour for every ticket that is created or every problem that the customer raises, right? But am I really solving that problem, or am I just trying to close that ticket in the fastest, shortest possible time so that my KPIs, right? So as a product leader, what I try to do as much as possible is that I spend at least half a day every month and be on the customer agent's shoes and try to question every process that we follow as a customer agent. I try to see what are the questions that are created, what kind of automated responses do we give in the bot flow. Does it make sense? Doesn't, if I am a user, do I understand what is this response going to communicate to the user, right? So spending some time as an agent, because you really want to solve the problem, you don't want to close a ticket, right? And eating your own dog food, which means that we also organize a team level sort of couple of hours where everybody spend just 1 to 2 hours every month try to find bugs end to end, right? From the time the user searches for the product in a Google website till the time the sign up happens and some of the core flows happen. How does that flow look like? Many times we forget what is live in the product, right? Because we have not, I don't know how many of you have looked at the first time user experience beyond the initial time that you created your own account, right? Or when that feature changes once in a blue moon. Many times we see that, some of those flows are broken. The UI is broken, the UX is broken. It may not be very obvious on the metric all the time.
Yeah.
You see that some certain metrics are falling, but unless you go through that flow at least 5 times, you will not realize what is really wrong with that flow, right? Because you won't see that edge case unless you eat your own dog food.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that we do, or that I believe in, that we should be aware of in every organization to make it really customer obsessed.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gautam. It's really interesting to hear about how you have been a great part of customer obsession culture that has been followed at Gamescraft, right? So, on that note, I would like to ask you, Ayush, right? And in a B2B setup, how does this change? Is there a major difference line between B2B and B2C, where how do you practice customer obsession at OpsLyft?
Okay, got it. I think it's pretty much the same, Surbhi. As to what basically Gautam mentioned, I think I kind of took a note as well of the 2 points wherein Gautam mentioned, right, that eating your own dog food kind of really, helps you always stay realistic. And I think it's more about we as a company kind of really staying in the customer shoes always, right? And I think to what I think Gautam also mentioned, that it's not about solving for I would say tickets in the shortest amount of time being possible. I think it's the other way around, that is the solving for the customer problems in the shortest time being possible, right? And I think the same 2 concepts kind of really well apply in a B2B setup as well. So what happens in a B2B setup, right, wherein we usually hear things from the market that okay, you have to kind of put yourself into the customer shoes and build whatever they ask you to do, and then kind of really expand from there. But I think that's sort of a very objective way of looking at customer obsession in a B2B I would say setup. I think one of the ways that essentially what we do practice at OpsLyft is to kind of deploy all the instruments and measures to be as close to the customers as being possible, right? So I think that's one of the kind of things that we do. So what this kind of really means to us is that I think our designers and our product managers kind of they obviously make it a habit to kind of visit the customer offices, or even I would say through some remote instruments as well, to kind of really understand their day in a life, right? And this is something that we kind of really do to really put ourselves in the customer shoes in a way that we are able to feel their pain and frustrations throughout the day in whatever they are doing, right? It might not be sometimes obviously directly related to the product problems that we are focused on solving as a company, right? But doing this as a habitual activity in terms of maintaining, I would say, very high degree of frequent communication with them, and not just basically relying upon the data points that we have collected from the product analytics systems, but like being with them, reading like between the lines to what they have to say about things that they like usually do in their day-to-day life. I think that teaches us a lot about the frustrations and the pain points of what our users are actually going through on a day-to-day basis, right? For us, I think that's one of the primary drivers of customer obsession that we practice at OpsLyft, while building our products, right? That's one, I would say. Secondly, when it comes to even, I would say, when Gautam, as you mentioned about having those metrics in place, right, which sort of kind of like become a very objective in nature for different teams, and becomes, as you rightly said, as a performance evaluation criteria for people at the end of the day, right? I think that is what like we also like really thought about it when we were, I think, deploying our performance review cycles, measures, etc., as an early stage startup, and like after a kind of like going through multiple iterations of it, right? What we kind of like really did to kind of like introduce a flavor of customer obsession in it is that we really tied up the performance evaluation criteria, the metrics, which are actually the metrics of success of our customers. I think for some of our, I think, B2B customers, like against the product value that we kind of like deliver, I would say the growth metric, it would kind of like really empower the value metric, it would kind of like really impact at the customer, and like, let's say, could be ARR, right? So that is what the metric, I think, in the initial stages, we also like really started to keep kind of, that, okay, for this basically, I would say, type of customers, right? This is going to be the success metric of the product as well, right? So that kind of like really kind of like brought us in sync with respect to our customer goals, as well as, what we as a company, should be focusing on our, I would say, product success goal as well. So I think that's second way of how we as a company kind of like really look at customer obsession. Lastly, I think if you speak to our product managers, right, we have, I think, our definition of product roadmap in the company, right? I think we don't call it, I would say, a list of features or the things that we have to kind of like really build over the course of, let's say, this like amount of time, etc. I think our definition of product roadmap, has lately been changed into that, okay, hey, it's nothing but a priority list of customer problems that we have to solve, basically, in a particular time frame, right? I think that's how we look at the product roadmap as well. I think these are the few points, Surbi, that what comes to top of my mind when it comes to customer obsession at OpsLyft, or specifically in a B2B, to what I could understand so far in my limited knowledge.
Right. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ayush, for sharing that. That really gave us a sense of, what customer first culture could really mean for a young and high startup like OpsLyft in a B2B setup, right? So moving ahead, I would really like to quote what Nir Ayal, the best-selling author of an amazing book called Book, has said. According to him, being customer obsessed and being customer focused are actually two different ideas. Being customer focused would ask you to satisfy customers' current needs and demands, right? While being customer obsessed will have you invent and deliver on unanticipated future needs, foreseeing and aspiring for a long-term customer delight. So Gautam, I would like to ask you here, like, how much do you agree with this? Do you have some stories to share to contrast this particular difference?
Right. So I think I strongly believe in this, right? As in, it comes from two angles, right? One is that if you're only solving for users' current need, you will never be competitive in a market, right?
Yeah.
Because, the user needs keep evolving, right? And if you only build for what is required today, by the time you release it, people would have already gone past that requirement as a need or as a want, right, or as a requirement. So I think, and more importantly, like, the objective here for everybody should be that, how can we delight a user, right?
Yeah.
So it is not just about, let's say, customers are happy. My, let's say, NPS is 60. But, I want to, like, how can I make it 100, for example, right? Hypothetically, right? How can I make my CSAT score, let's say, 5 out of 5? That is delight, right? So if you want to delight a user, there is no other way other than to solve for the future needs also, like anticipating the future needs, right? It is not that you may not build it right now, but you should clearly know that, how are the demands of the user gonna change, right? And here, as in the typical thing, right, that typically happens is that you ask a user what he wants, right? The Ford has said this, right? Henry Ford has said this, that if you ask users what they want, they will say that I need faster horses, right? They will not say I need cars, right? But if you ask the L2 question, like if you ask users what they want, they will tell you what is obvious for them, right? But if you ask them like, what are you really trying to solve for, right? They will say that I want faster mobility, I want low cost of maintenance, I want to not worry about my safety and all of that. Then probably cars are much better value proposition than breeding a better set of horses, right? So this is exactly anticipating future needs of the user, right? Which is that you understand the real problem that they're facing, as in not like you can listen to users, but then ask them, why do you need it, right? And many times I feel that product managers and many people don't ask that secondary question, that like I'm all ears to you, but you tell me, why do you need this, right? So one of the things that keep coming up, right, as in especially in a B2C environment, unlike in a B2B place, there is a lot of decisions which are, I would say, data driven or hypothesis driven, right? Because we cannot talk to millions of users, right? Maybe we can talk to 10 users, maybe we'll talk to 100 users, but it may not always be a representative sample of all the experiences that every user would be having, unlike in a B2B setup where the number of users might be a little more manageable, right? But so, and like for us, the most important thing is from a monetization standpoint, the ability to make a payment is one of the most important monetization levers, right? As in any product for that matter. And so I'll just share this example, which is that it is not about so it is easy to blame users for lack of their awareness, right? So when we look at the payment data, we see that first time user success is probably low, right? But when you look at the data more deeply, you will see that people are attempting 5 times, right, and still not able to make a successful payment, right? But if you look at the error codes that the payment gateway sends you for each of these user attempts, it says that user drop off, right? User drop off typically happens when the user has low intent. If somebody is trying 5 times, he definitely does not have low user intent, right? So when we started investigating this, we found a lot of issues in terms of how the payment system is being handled, API error response, etc., right? So we said that how can we improve this? So we come out with a lot of better ways of handling it. So I'm just saying that we need to start asking those L2 questions, right? This is a simple example, but I'm just trying to say that this is how all problems need to be solved. Because if you start building only what the user asks you, you will never solve their real problem. You will only build for today. You will not build for tomorrow.
Correct.
So yeah, this is what I can.
Glad you shared that, Gautam. That really gave us an understanding of how both of these concepts of being customer obsessed and customer focused stand differently. On that note, I would like to ask you, if we really go by this differentiation, right? When do you think is the right time to transition from being customer focused to customer obsessed for early stage startup, right? What is your take on this at OpsLyft?
Okay, for OpsLyft, right? I think so. I'll basically switch gears from here in a sense that okay, from OpsLyft perspective, I'll take this into account for a B2B startup, like in general as well, to what I think so far understood about B2B and what we do here at OpsLyft, right? I think from a B2B perspective and what we do at OpsLyft, or rather when we changed ourselves from being, I would say, customer focused to really customer obsessed, right? I think right after our first customer that we kind of really signed up, right? I think as I think Gautam also mentioned, right? If you always keep on building to what the basically user asks you to build to, you'll never be able to solve for tomorrow. I think that's really very true, and a personal experience as well on that part. So when we signed up our first customer, right? I think then given that B2B is a type of every B2B product is not going to be something that it is going to experience, like I would say millions and billions of users. At the end of the day, it is going to have I would say, as Gautam mentioned, a manageable user footprint at any point in time of the day, right? So your first customer always happens to be someone who along with you would build the majority of your first MVP, or maybe even the first product for that matter, right? So maybe I think like up to a certain degree we can say that the customer obsession and the customer focus is sort of in an intermix over there. So you really can't make much of a difference or choice, let's say, when it comes to your like building the product with first customer, if you go via that route, right? So I think that's where it lies. But as and when I think you move from 1 to basically other number of, I would say, customers, right? 1 to 2, 2 to 4 to 10, etc., right? I think that is where I would say, the tipping point kind of like really lies, that we should like really solve for, I would say, customer obsession more and not being customer focused, right? Because I think I'll tell you like what really happens, right? That if you're kind of like always being customer focused by having, let's say, more than one customer in a B2B setup, right? Like what happens, like really after a certain point in time, you end up kind of like landing up into a situation wherein every customer basically is asking you to build something different, right? And then it then kind of like really happens that that the product experiences, I think a lot of customizations, I think we've like gone through this all of that, right? And I think it took us the like really like effort to kind of like pull back us through from that spot and like again organize ourselves into a standard like product roadmap, right? But still, I think I'll go ahead and talk more about it, that the product kind of experiences more customizations, and then there is always a new tangent opening up in terms of the themes of the problems that you're kind of like really solving, and also and obviously kind of like there is no clear visibility and I would say foresight in terms of what the product market fit for a for a product like yours, for a B2B setup kind of like really looks like, if this approach is like really continued for long, right? And obviously it kind of like really starts affecting the team as well, right? The team gets kind of like really burnt out, and at some point in time you kind of like truly do not even remain, I would say, a product based startup, because like every customer, if it's sort of like, let's say mid-market plus range sort of category, right? They start asking you different needs, so your teams kind of like get divided to between the customers, etc. So it's more like sort of becoming a service org rather than a completely product led org altogether, right? So I think from that perspective, I believe that it's okay, maybe in my perception, that you be extremely customer focused in your first iteration of the product with a particular customer, right? But I think going forward with basically more than one customers in place, it's more important to be basically be more customer focused, customer obsessed rather than basically being customer focused, because that will not end up like creating a standard product. And I think as Gautam also mentioned, right, like while interacting with, when you have, let's say, more than one customer on your plate, right, and you have to kind of like build for many instead of building for one, right? Asking a lot of whys until basically that particular why loop kind of like really becomes a fact at the end of the day. I think we have learned it like the very hard way, so like that is something that always has to be practiced, because because at the end of the day, I think this brings me to the second point, where Gautam mentioned that the customers are sometimes maybe even not knowing their I would say own problems basically the best if you ask them in the first go itself, right? They'll tell you their perception or their experience about the problem so far what they're having, right? But as product managers, or I would say as founders, or as a company, I would say from an early stage setup perspective, right? It's very important for us to kind of like really dig down deep into the I would say keep the problems to the point it kind of like really cannot be broken down further, right? And I think that is one of the definitions of product, like I would say customer obsession as well, that you're so interested to like really know the customer problem, right? That you know the problem better than them at the end of the day. And I think secondly, our job as a company and as product people, right, is to kind of like know only the problems, right? And I think Gautam mentioned that you listen to the customers, right? And the example of Henry Ford, as in when I think Gautam gave, right? It's very important for us to kind of like only listen to the customer problems and like build your own, I would say, or propose your best solution versions of it, right? Because if you start, I would say, taking into account the potential solutions that the customer basically has in mind, right? I think that is a version of the solution that customer is like really asking you to kind of like really do, and that might not be the best solution out there, or that is like really solving their problem, because that is their way of really getting out of the problem. Maybe temporarily that might not be the best in case for that matter, right? So I think like that is what I would say, when it comes to I would say that how that shift or the transition from customer focus to customer obsession like really looks like, and how like we have learned it the hard way, and like now like trying to be correct on that part at least. Yeah.
Right, I would totally agree with you, Ayush here. I think in the end, it's more than drawing any differentiation line here. It's about showing a non-stop dedication to customer needs and a consistent willingness to go above and beyond for them, right? So yeah, moving ahead, I think one of the most important factors for successfully building products that customers need, right, love and get delighted by, is creating such a customer-obsessed culture, not just in the product team but across the organization, right? So Gautam, I would like to ask you, what blockers do you see from an organization standpoint when it comes to truly being customer obsessed, right? Have you faced any situation where the teams are not aligned, or like any or business needs took over customer needs? As a product leader, how do you navigate such situations?
Right. So I think I can approach it from two angles, right? One is that like, although we talk about customers, we don't in a B2C setting, right? It may not be true for B2B, but in B2C setting, there is no real customer person, right? As in, I'm just saying that in B2B, you can say that, maybe client 1 to client 2 to client 3. Whereas for us, it is that, it's a number on a data sheet, right? Which says that, this is 20% of our customers face this, or 5% of our customers face this, on a big number, right? So there is an abstraction of users into a number which does not bring out the real pain of these users, right? So we'll say that, only 5% of people are affected with this. Let's build something that is even more ROI impactful, right? So in terms of challenges, as in the biggest challenges, how do we prioritize for a user experience or a customer problem rather than a metric which can be quantified, which will have a definitive, let's say, monetization outcome or a business outcome, right? So that is the first part of the challenge, right? Because the user is not real; it's a number on a sheet,
yeah,
or a dashboard, right? And the second part is that we need to understand that people all of us are humans, right? As in and unfortunately, and that is true for everybody, which is that we have very strong opinions or biases that we may or may not be aware of, right? So we try to conclude on certain points of view based on our own heuristics and biases, right? And then, how do I prioritize it, right? How do I say that whether this is the most important thing or something else is most important? Because I come from a frame of mind saying that, for me, business goals or business metrics are most important. Marketing will say that, these are the 5 things that are most important for me. There'll be a customer support team which will come and say that, for me to increase the LT or solve the user problem, these are the things, right? So each people have their own objectives, their own biases, their own strong opinions about why they propose something, right? And why something is more important. So it's a tricky thing to solve for, right? As in, there is no right answer here. So probably what we try to do is that, we try to bring sensitivity, right? In terms of there is always, unfortunately, in many, this is true for most startups also, there is always a shiny new object syndrome, right? Where, anything new that is being built will always have all the attention, rather than the core flow of the user, which is actually what the user needs, right? Or they use it 10 times a day. And the new feature that you might be building might be only used by probably 5% of the users and probably once in a day, right? So many times what happens is that you ignore the feature or the core flows which are probably used 10 times, 100 times a day by almost like 100% of the users, and you start allocating resources to a new object, which probably is gonna only have a material effect on a less number of people, right? And core flows and from a user experience standpoint also, people benchmark you to the lowest experience in the product, right? What I mean by that is like let's say you take for the current ride hailing situation, right? Everybody is like not happy with Ola or Uber because the drivers keep declining, right? So you actually blame it on the product, not on the driver. You say that Uber doesn't work, you say that Ola doesn't work, right? Because you have put the benchmark of the product to your lowest experience of the product, right? And typically that happens when your core flows are broken. Like what is being used probably by 100% of the users almost multiple times a day. Those are the features that really needs focus and attention, rather than build a new feature that will solve for probably 5% of the problem statement of a different user need, right? And it's a challenging problem, right? As in, this is what is real user insight or real user behavior, right? But to get alignment of the stakeholders, to get the alignment of internal teams, to build what is most really useful for customers is quite difficult, right? So it involves stakeholder management, influencing without authority, putting the customer out there, reading out their words, so that people understand what this person is going through, right? Which also complements to the first part that I said, eating your own dog food, right? When you experience your own product, you will start feeling or empathizing with that user more and more, right? Because you face the same set of problems that the user is facing, right? So and like obviously there is a trade-off, right? As in between the growth that the team has to pursue versus solving for customer needs. But from a longer standpoint, I strongly believe that solving for customer experience first and solving for the real needs of the user first, rather than focusing on, as in you need to put, as in the right balance is always tough, right? But if you solve for the customer needs, you will always have a better LTV for the user, right? But if you build a new feature that might bring in additional use cases, additional monetization, a new cohort of users, all of that will happen. But you don't want to antagonize the existing set of users who have already trusted their money, effort, time on your product, right? So it's a very difficult call to take, but the only way that you can do it is by sensitizing people, eating your own dog food, making sure that the real words of the users are put out there, so that everybody understands what that person is going through, right? So that they start empathizing with the real user, and understand and get an alignment saying that unless and until the core flows are not stable, or if we don't set a benchmark or a goal for those core flows itself, building a new feature may not always matter, right?
Right. Thanks, Gautam, for sharing your experience. Those were really some of really good insights which can help teams to foresee the diverse situations and effectively solve for them. But next up, for our audience here, I would like if we can, break down into steps or frameworks they can really follow. So, Gautam, how does product road mapping and prioritization work in a customer obsessed culture? Like, are there any your favorite frameworks or tools you would like to share regarding?
So I think this is where I like what Ayush said in the beginning, which is that like solving around problem statements rather than features, right? I think when you typically go for a road mapping exercise, everybody will come with their own set of features, right? And how do you change it around and say that don't tell me the features that you want, tell me the problem statements that you want to solve for, right? There might be like 50 different ways to solve the same problem, right? So you can come and align on a final roadmap based on what user data, consumer feedback, what the metrics says or the data says. So I think that is the first shift that is required, and in which I completely agree with what Ayush said, which is that let's define what are the problem statements to be solved rather than the features per se, right? And till that problem statement is not solved, we need to continuously dig down and try to see how that problem statement can be solved. Right?
Yeah.
It could be about retention. It could be about customer, complaints. It could be about certain metrics around acquisition, retention, whatever you name it. Right. So let's define those metrics. Let's define it at the level where we really want to. It could be an L2 metric also. Right. So let's define it that level, and obviously a prioritization can happen basis that. And the second thing, I think this from a framework standpoint, as in, one of the important concepts I think all of us should be aware of is the jobs to be done framework, sort of brought into light by Clayton Christensen. He's a Harvard Business School professor. So in his book, I think Innovator's Dilemma, he sort of talks about it. He talks about an experiment where, the experiment is quite big, but so he was basically, as in, if I just take a minute to explain that, because it's the simplest way of explaining it. The experiment or the task that he was given was that, he was sort of hired by some of these fast food giant. And they had a milkshake problem, right? So the market share for their milkshakes were quite less compared to the competitor. And they tried a lot of experiment. They asked people what they want. People said that I want thicker shakes, I want strawberry, I want something else as a taste, etc. And they made all the changes, right? But the market share never improved, right? So that is when Clayton Christensen was sort of tasked with the same objective. And when he started watching the customers' lives, he tried to figure out what is the job that this milkshake is trying to solve for in the user's life, right? And what he discovered is that most of 50% of the milkshakes were sold before 8 a.m. in the morning, or somewhere around there, 8:30 in the morning, right? And when he observed all these users, or these customers, he saw that they are actually substituting their breakfast for a milkshake, right? Because all of them had long commutes to work. So what they would do is, they cannot have a sandwich or bagel or any of these other things, because they sort of dirty up the car. You need to clean yourself after you eat them, right? And it also becomes cold, right? If you take it out. So milkshake actually was the best breakfast meal that these users had, right? So, and he said that, let's change let's advertise it. So the marketing has to be changed. The product, the way that the product was designed has to be changed. The price point has to be optimized. The carry case has to be optimized for that, it's easy to be taken away on an automobile, right? And when those things were done, the product, the sales just skyrocketed. Right? So this is the jobs to be done framework, right? This is applicable for every product that we use, right? It solves sort of an inherent user need of each users, right? You use social media for your boredom. You use let's say I would say for your gluttony, as in, or your let's say hunger. You use all your food apps for your greed. For a lack of a better word, you use all these wealth creating apps, stock market, trading, all of that. So all of these things have their own inherent psychological need, right? You can break it down into the job, the specific job that your product is also doing. But every time there is an inherent need that the user is trying to solve for with your product. So if you try to understand that, what is the real inherent need of the user, you can further break it down into L2 objectives, which says that, how can I get entertained, or how can I get away from boredom, right? As in, if I want to get away from boredom, I can go to the park, I can walk with my friend, I can talk on the phone, I can do 20 other things, right? And probably social media is also one area where I can do it, right? Or games is also one area which I can do it, right? So that is a very specific job from that standpoint, right? So if you understand what is the real job that the user is trying to do, which sort of that is from a user standpoint, and from a company standpoint, it is what is the metric or what is the problem that the company has to solve, or what is the vision that we want to solve for. If you marry these two things together, that is where the real product road mapping exercise comes into the picture, right?
Right. Thanks, Gautam, for sharing these effective frameworks with the audience. I'm sure that would help solve a lot of problems, including the problem of effectively measuring customer insights and feedback on the product. So, Ayush, here I would like to get a little bit of more understanding from your side. In early stages of building a startup, how does this idea flow throughout the organization, right? How do you collect customer insights and feedback and measure the success of your product in a customer obsessed culture? Any frameworks and actionable methods you would like to discuss with us?
Understood, right? I think it's pretty much the same, Survi. As to what I think Gautam mentioned about that how to kind of like really drive. That I would say that driving a customer obsession culture throughout the organization is a tricky affair. Yeah, I mean it's definitely challenging, right? Because and the reason it's challenging, it's because that people have their own biases, they have their own views of looking at the problems or looking at the situations altogether. So creating I would say one alignment out of it that you specifically would want, or like let's say specifically I would say what you would typically want is always going to be hard. I think this is something that we kind of like realized as a company pretty early on, and the way we are trying to kind of like really address it, right? And so far I think that is sort of like working for us in the current scale that we have in terms of the number of people across sales, marketing, customer success, product and engineering. I think is that we try to basically speak as much as the tone and the language of the customer throughout the day, sort of like I think let's say we are working with 2 or 3 certain B2B enterprise companies, right? So I think the conversations between the product teams and the engineering teams often are up to a certain degree it has gone up to that depth wherein one of our basically people even tries to kind of like mimic the other person altogether, that he speaks like this way altogether, right? So I think that is one of the ways I would say cultural ways where we kind of like really see that that if you kind of like really feel the tonality and the language of your customer, right, or is able to kind of like really develop a culture out of it, right, throughout the organization, I think then everybody is sort of like really trying to kind of like really get into that mindset that what our basically customers want at the end of the day, that is something we also want, right? So I think then it is just a matter of, I think, at the end of the day, to kind of like really transform the individual, I would say, goal settings with respect to team people, that if we are now all basically part of the same cult, which is nothing but, I would say, the language of our customers or the tonality of our customers, right? So let's then basically, transform like our objectives into something that our customers would also care about. I think that would be the right word to kind of like really use over here, that one of the things that we kind of like always ask ourselves while setting the objectives across different teams with respect to marketing, product, sales, engineering, and customer success, to be very specific, right? Is that would these things that we are setting as an objective, right, would be like really cared by our audience at the end of the day, right? I think if that is something our gut feeling kind of like really answers yes to it, we like kind of like really go ahead and set that as a key process or framework inside the company with respect to developing a culture out of it, right? Now, when it comes to, I think, using frameworks, right, to what we kind of like really do, I think thank you, Gautam, you kind of like really brought about that jobs to be done kind of like framework to be used, right? I think I can't stress it enough that how important this is. Given that I wasn't coming from a product background and we all are a bunch of folks who did not essentially have any product background per se, but as and when I think we discovered jobs to be done framework was a sort of our natural discovery with our intent to kind of like really building a great product at the end of the day, right? It's an amazing framework when to kind of like really realize in practice, and the reason that why we were able to appreciate it so much and practice it to the core of our heart, because so we are building a SaaS, right? And SaaS,
I think we lost you.
What basically you have to kind of like really get to point is that a product is nothing but an entity, right? Which is basically doing a particular activity that basically the customer would himself or herself is supposed to, like, let's say, be doing altogether. So if you are going to basically replace a technology, or introduce a technology into a customer's ecosystem, it is nothing but an entity basically doing someone's job at the end of the day. So that is where we started, like, really, I think our product features kind of like really saw a very different tangent to kind of like really go around when we started thinking that is anything that we are building, what is the, I would say, jobs that this is going to like really complete for the user at the end of the day. And that sort of like really also brings me to the point that another framework that we kind of like really mix with the jobs to be done sort of like framework is that about the 5W and 1H sort of thing. That's about asking that whenever we are figuring out the customer jobs, right, which we have to solve from the product, I think we never shy away from kind of like answering the why, when, who, where, what, and the how part of it, right? To like really develop a clarity on the job that we are kind of like really going to solve for the customer, right? So I think these are the two frameworks that come to my mind on that we kind of like really practice at least in our conversations on a daily basis, if not basically truly on pen and paper and and lastly upon I think another product. So I think Surbhi, that would be something that I'll have to say about OpsLyft as of now. Yeah.
Great to hear that, Ayush. I agree, as processes in a startup around different functions can be complex and confusing at certain points. Very interesting to hear these operating frameworks you have in place to deliver the maximum value for your customers. So Gautam and Ayush, moving ahead, do you have any example of your favorite products or an organization in mind, of course, other than yours, which participates in customer obsession successfully? Our audience would love it if you could tell us what we can learn from their approaches. Yeah, Gautam, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think for me it is Amazon, right? As in Amazon, if you look at the leadership principles of Amazon, as in customer obsession is one of the most important pillars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, and we all experience it also, right? Day-to-day interaction whenever we shop or interact with Amazon. So for me, that would be the a good example or an organization which the heart.
Great. Anything, Ayush, you would like to tell us?
Yeah, I think I had the same answer, right? I think Gautam said that already. I think because I think, yes, I think if you look at it's not just that Amazon is Amazon. That is why we have to say Amazon over here, right? If you look at Amazon's, I think keep the. I think it's a vision statement, Gautam, if I'm not wrong. I think they the mission statement, right?
Leadership. I think there are some leadership principles that they have.
Correct.
I think there are some 14 leadership principles, if I'm not wrong. But
correct.
One of them is being customer obsessed.
And I think on their mission statement as well, they kind of, I think, really type in, right, that to become the Earth's most,
customer-centric company.
Customer-centric company, where people can basically buy things online. I think that is something very powerful to kind of like really hear, right? So I think my answer would be similar, same like Surbhi, but I think in addition, I have to mention something different, if at all, over here, right? I think from a B2B perspective, HubSpot is one product, I think, which is, I would say, I find it like really inspiring when it comes to basically really solving for the customer problems at all times and through all mediums to what they do, right? I mean, the product experience, of course, it speaks for itself, right? It's such an amazing product to kind of like really work with, right? And then if you look at basically their entire ecosystem as a company, right? The kind of content that they kind of like really produce, right? I mean, I could like really appreciate HubSpot and can talk more about it every day because like I was coming from an engineering background when I decided to kind of like really start up OpsLyft and sales and marketing was sort of something like alienated world for me, right? And I think I can't thank enough basically for the resources that I could like really found on HubSpot, this like resources section altogether that like really taught me how at least the basics of the sales and marketing in general. So I think that is, I think, what like really shows in HubSpot sort of like really culture as well, that they're like genuinely trying to kind of like like really help the end user to kind of like really become better at the sales and marketing like side of the affairs of the world, right? I think that would be another I would say example, Surbhi, that I'll like highly that at least I'll like get highly inspired from. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Ayush and Gautam. I think all of us somehow agree with the organizations you guys mentioned are the best ones in following the culture of customer obsession for every client of theirs. So, on an ending note, I think if there are any final tips and tricks of any favorite books or resources to share that could help product managers excel in their roles. So, our audience would love to hear that from you.
Okay. Gautam, why don't we start from you? I don't think so.
I've been starting all the time. Why don't we start this time?
नहीं यार, I think मतलब कि in all honesty, I think right, I don't have a specific book recommendation or a book suggestion over here. I can maybe just suggest like one or two like general books that I think I could relate somewhat product management as well by reading them. I think the Lean Startup is one. I think that like really teaches you something about like product management like side of things as well. And I think in order to kind of like really develop I would say a culture in an organization, which I'm not sure that if it is a right book for a customer obsessed culture, but I think like No Rules by Reed Hastings, I think like that like really teaches you about a good culture in general, which you can like use as first principles and apply to your customer obsession thinking as well. So I think that's there. And in order to kind of like really develop some thick skin, I think around that what is something your prioritization and sometimes ruthless prioritization also should look like while practicing customer obsession, right? I think the hard thing about hard things is something that I'd highly recommend. I would say all the entrepreneurs to kind of like really read it at least once, I would say. Yeah. Well, I think I'm not sure that this answer like doesn't like really fit into the context of conversation, but yeah, I think that's what something that I'll have to talk about in terms of books. Yeah.
Thanks, Ayush. Gautam, anything you would like to share, or any final tips and tricks, or any resources you would like to share?
So I think I'll just recommend that just read the Innovator's Dilemma by and I think it is a pretty thorough book, right? And I'm just saying that if I have to recommend one in the specific context that we are operating, I think that'll be really good. There is one more book called Inspired by this guy. I forgot. Marty Gagan, right? So he talks about how product management should be done, right? So if you want to be a product-led organization, I would say that Inspired by Marty Gagan is a very interesting book, and I think everybody should read it just to understand the foundational principles of product management generally, and why we are building, what are we building, what should be a product-led company, what should product-led growth look like, and he has collated all his information over the last 15-20 years, and it's pretty summarized with clear contradictions, points of view, challenges, all of that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Gautam and Ayush. So, as we are ending, there is a question from our audience here I'd like to pick up, right? Just a second. Nilesh has asked basically from us, like, Gautam and Ayush, the question is for you. Sometimes when businesses are following customer obsession, lack of innovation quickly becomes a real risk and opens opportunities for competitors to develop a competitive advantage, right? So how to be customer obsessed and also look at the competitiveness in the industry while being innovative at the same time, right? So yeah.
Okay, should I answer or?
Yeah, Gautam.
Go ahead, Gautam. I think please go ahead. Yeah.
Right. So this is sorry if I understand the question that how do we keep track of competition, or like can you just explain the first part again?
Yeah. The Nilesh is basically asking like how can we take care of the competitiveness in the market while being innovative at the same time if we are trying to be customer obsessed in our organization. Yeah.
So I don't think these are mutually exclusive. Right? So I think it is one and the same thing. You can be competitive, you can be better than your competition if you are customer obsessed, right? What competition will tell us is like the more that I spend in, like, I have 15-16 years of work ex now. So the more time that I spend in these startups and organizations, the more I realize that technically there is no first mover advantage in any organization or any sector. right?
Yeah.
What really wins is if you've really solved a problem statement. As in, you can be the first guy to enter a market, but it does not really matter. As in, Facebook was not the first social media product. Google was not the first search engine, right? Mobile phones were not invented by Apple, right? So it does not really matter whether you are the first mover or not. It actually matters whether you're really solving the user's problem in a fast iterative manner with the right learning loops, right? So you need to learn from your mistakes. You need to make sure that you understand the user needs very clearly, and then make them experiences that are far superior, right? And eventually, when you keep doing this, you can obviously listen to, you can understand what the competitors are doing, right? But that may not be the right way to do the same problem solving, or that may not always be relevant for your audience or for your TG that you're solving, right? So if you start copy pasting features of your competitors, it may not really solve all the needs of your users, and it may be something that the competitor might have decided, like, this is not working for us, we may need to sunset it, and you think that it's a very important feature, right? So never, I would say, copy the features of competitors unless and until you really understand whether it is applicable for your users, right? Your TG could also be different. So if you build a feature that is not even relevant for your TG, it is not going to work, right? So I don't think these are mutually exclusive. I think it is one and the same, right? But if you solve for your customer needs, you will always be better than competitors, or
Yeah.
Right.
That is true.
We just now got one more question as well. We are running a bit ahead of time, so let's just pick it. This one last question. Ayush, I think you can take this up, right? So Amin has asked us, like, a customer interaction is imperative to understand user needs. So in B2B market, you might not have direct access to the actual users all the time, right? So how would you get to know what exactly those users want in such setting?
Well, I would answer this question in a sense that like, I mean, you got to have at some point in time the access to basically like your users or your customers, because I think if you do not have access to let's say your users or your buyers at the end of the day, right? Then you actually don't know who your customer is at the end of the day, right? I mean, so I would like I know it's definitely hard because B2B setting is definitely very sophisticated sometimes. And you might not be able to get to basically that I would say I mean, the required amount of access that you particularly would feel that you need to kind of like deliver or solve for the experience, right? But at the end of the day, I think that's an effort for like in itself. I completely realize that, but at the end of the day, you got to basically have access to basically your user to kind of like really understand all the things that me and Gautam kind of like really spoke about, right? It was like definitely hard for us as well, right, initially, right? I mean, especially for us where we were all basically young like folks all together with no significant, I would say, industry experience, and no one kind of like knew us in the market as well. Forget about our credibility in general, etc. So yeah, of course, definitely it was like super hard for us to kind of like like really knock the doors of a company and ask that, okay, hey, can we speak to basically your like director of DevOps or your basically VP of infra, etc. Right? Like all those things were like really hard for us. But I think at the end of the day, one of the things that if I have to like even talk about like be in the solution mode and talk about the solution to the problem, right? I think in context to our industry. So in a B2B world, right, I think the model is now, I would say, rapidly shifting from I would say a sales-led model to completely product-led, right? I think more and more basically buyers and users are now basically preferring the try before you buy experience altogether, right? So what I say is that the product-led growth is going to be the standard norm, right? So what it translates to the context of this question is that like if you have I would say even a basic product at the end of the day, right? Like one of the strategies that could like really work out and that I think I've seen for multiple people like really working out well is, right, that you basically solve for I would say some degree of distribution, maybe even a free distribution distribution over the basic product that you kind of like really have, right? I think that's what Postman also did initially, right? They simply like released a Chrome extension, against the I would say the APIs that they like for people to kind of like really go ahead and see if the API is a hit or not. As simple as that, right? And they just distributed it widely. So even though they didn't have basically the access to, I would say, the end user in that particular company, right? Their Chrome extension was a distribution channel that was accessible by the end user as well, right? And that is when I think like you kind of like subconsciously open the doors of yourself to that end user, and you would be having all the data points that you kind of like really need to like see if the user is kind of like really using the product or not, right? And if there's a delight by any means, right? I think then of course the user like would come back to you through some or the other I would say channels to kind of like suggest you improvements, and then you can like iterate the product from there on, right? So I think one of the solutions here like could be to sum it up, that following a try it before you buy experience is definitely going to help, and like for basically cutting out those barriers of entry when it comes to I would say selling or basically getting a product, I would say, to an adoption to I would say enterprises or the companies where you do not have, I would say, direct links or access to when it comes to, I would say, like for someone, let's say, having a predefined or I would say pre-carrying network which like he or she might have access to, right? So I think this is something that like helped for us as well, and like we think that this is the future of basically SaaS as well, like the PLG. Yeah.
Thanks, Ayush, for sharing that. I hope, Amin and Nilesh, that this answers your questions. So thank you so much, Gautam and Ayush, for joining us today and sharing these wonderful insights with us. After this insightful discussion, we hope our audience is a bit more sure if their respective organization and teams fit this mold of customer obsession, right? So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Gautam. Thanks for taking the call. Okay. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.